What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hard Work Beats Talent, where we aim to draw upon the insights of our inner circle in order to help our listeners make more informed decisions about their career and life through the wisdom and mistakes made by us and our guests throughout their journeys. I'm Nikita, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Alex.
What's up, everyone?
On today's episode, we're joined by yet another very special guest and member of our inner circle, Beth. Welcome to the show. So as we get into it, do you want to give us a little summary about who you are, where you come from, what you do?
Sure. Hi, I'm Beth. I was born in a small village in West Sussex. I currently work for Amazon, worked there for about 6 years, and I am the head of operational excellence, working in the Amazon Fresh stores. And in about 2 weeks, I am moving companies to a Series A startup to become the director of brand management. I studied law and had a big career change. So that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. So I think what we're going to have to do today is probably split in between what you currently do and what you see yourself doing going forwards, to the extent there are big differences. But to start with, could you just give us an overview as to what your current role encompasses?
Sure. It's quite wide. So I've done probably about 6 roles in 6 years in Amazon. A variety of commercial roles, largely commercial at the beginning of my career, then kind of led more into like commercial strategy.
When you, sorry to break your flow, but when you say commercial role, like what did that involve? Just to give our listeners like a bit of an idea.
Largely driving like a P&L, so profit and loss of a like smaller category or business within Amazon. So I started my career kind of leading the cookware category, for example. So I was responsible for the money we were making, how much my category was growing, and I think I was managing about 10 to 20 million revenue a year. And I was kind of responsible for the outputs of that. So that's kind of what I'd call like a commercial role. It's like trading.
Yeah.
When you say
development and growth of that sector.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you say output, what do you mean by that? Do you mean ensuring you hit that P&L, or is it what you do with that P&L? Like, what does that actually mean? Sorry, I'm very naive to all of this.
No, that's totally fine. So I would basically be responsible for hitting our growth targets. So let's say, for example, Amazon wanted the category to grow 40%. Maybe it wanted double figures of like the industry at the time. So that's kind of Amazon is a very aggressive growth place. So I was responsible for building that strategy. So how are we actually going to grow? So that means how we're going to get new customers, how are we going to compete with our competitors, what marketing are we going to do, how do we get like the best delivery, how do we get the best product. But obviously all that costs money. So the other side of the performance is how do we get all this growth, but also actually make money at the end of the day for Amazon. So there's no point growing an unprofitable business.
Yeah.
So the other half of my role was, okay, how do I like launch this amazing strategy for the customers, but actually make sure that on our bottom line, we are reducing costs and we are driving good operational performance so that we are not driving kind of like costs at the bottom line.
So is it strategy and implementation then?
Yeah. So at different times in my year, I would be the person implementing, and then obviously as I went on, I have teams that I'll be like kind of delivering through others, and they'd be implementing like the wider strategy. So we would agree, this is what we want to go after. These are kind of our 3 big bets, for example. And then as a whole team, we'd be driving those through. And in most commercial roles, you have very regular check-ins. So you're monthly, weekly, quarterly, you'll be checking in, okay, versus our target, are we hitting them?
Interesting. It sounds like CEO and COO training to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, I was lucky very early on to have kind of a big variety of responsibility at like a junior level. I think Amazon and kind of like the new companies these days really give young talent that opportunity of ownership.
Yeah. It helps you broaden your skills right?
Massively.
Yeah.
Like I remember being like 22 and being like, sorry, what am I responsible for?
See, it's quite interesting you say that, actually. Like I was doing one of these like pulse, internal surveys for my employer just today, actually. And they were, like the last question is, if you could change one thing, what would it be? And I said, like, give people more the ability to make decisions, right? And because people are like genuinely afraid to take any ownership or just like make a call or take a view. And I think on that subject is really important because that's where the growth is. So I think it's really great that much younger organizations are giving young people coming into their careers more accountability and responsibility.
No, that's certainly something that currently resonates with me because I've moved from the legal services sector where you're selling a legal service which you charge time for, to what we do now, which is effectively take risk-based decisions. And it's like a different job entirely, right? And by the sounds of it, you were making calls quite early on, and the learning, I suppose, comes from the fact that you make good calls and you make calls which you might have otherwise made, and yeah, you're effectively having an accelerated growth journey into how to take risk and how to mitigate it, and how to almost weigh your decisions, because like you said, I think a lot of people, when they do come to have to make a decision finally, probably are quite afraid of doing so. Yeah,
because they don't want to fail and make a mistake, but you need to in order to realize that that's not how you do something, or you can adjust something in order to improve.
And that really is responsibility of the business and the team that you're in. So like as a leader, you are responsible. You do not get innovation without risk. So you basically have to create a culture that says risk of failure, there is no such thing as failure, because even if you try something and you fail, you learn from what didn't work.
Risk of learning.
Right? So like everything's a data point. So like you launched this campaign, it didn't work. What did we learn? Okay, this bit didn't work, but actually this bit did. And like that's how you innovate. And if you have any kind of fear in your team or your business, then you'll go at such a slower pace because everyone wants to sign off everything to be like, cover your back. I don't take any risks.
So just in that journey of yours, you mentioned you were more on the commercial side, which we've dived a little bit deeper into. And then where did you move into from there?
So then I went on to kind of a special project for Amazon. So I joined that about 3.5 years ago. Amazon has these kind of top secret projects that obviously they're launching new businesses, new ideas all the time. So I was in a really small team, and it was basically like being like in a startup within the big world of Amazon. So there was about 6 of us, and this was trying to launch the Amazon Fresh stores in the UK. So for anyone who doesn't know, that is the tech-driven stores with just walkout technology. So there's no checkouts. You just go in.
Mad.
And you
I'm yet to try one. I really want to.
Yeah, it is wild.
Can't get my head around how that actually works.
You do feel like you're stealing.
Yeah.
You're like, are you sure I can just go? So yeah, I was pretty much tasked to do whatever was required in that.
Can you just bring that to life a bit? What did that look like day to day in terms of the responsibilities that you
I mean, this was an amazing opportunity for me. I was super lucky, right place, right time. I should have mentioned that I previously worked for Sainsbury's before I moved to Amazon. So I kind of went full cycle, and that's how I got into this job. Because I had grocery experience. So I had the kind of Amazonian experience, the e-commerce, the tech experience, and then I brought my grocery experience as well, which is a really good example of how like changing careers, actually they really can, there can be synergies across the industry.
You're utilising skills that you've gained in the past and you're leveraging them essentially.
It gave me the edge against hundreds of other people that wanted this job. Everyone wants to be on special projects in Amazon because it's a cool place to be. But what was I doing on a day-to-day basis? I mean, really anything from, at the beginning, I even went on like a real estate viewing for stores. I've never looked at property in my life, but there was nobody else.
Awesome.
And we kind of had a mantra in the team that, so for example, they asked me to look at, should we have an in-store bakery? So, in Sainsbury's you have your croissants and everything like that. Should we have one? That was the answer. And this is obviously going to be like a multi-million-pound investment if we do or we don't. So we have to make sure, like, does the customer want it? And I knew nothing about bakery. I said to my manager at the time, I've never worked in a bakery in my life.
Should have asked Nikki.
I mean, can you imagine walking in, grabbing a croissant and walking out like with no queues?
That is what you can do.
That is insane.
Because I came up with a business case.
Beth, we love you for it. We love you for it. That's it. I'm finding my next one.
And he was like, after you spend 1 week doing this, you'll know 100% more than everybody else in the team.
Yeah.
So like, just go for it. But again, that's that like no fear of failure thing. Again, like Amazon does really well at and empowers people to just be like, you transfer your skills to do something new, apply logic, like have some risk mitigation, and you can do that. So I was doing all sorts of things. I was kind of like trying to build our manufacturing supply chain.
And what does that actually look like ground up in terms of, because I understand it theoretically, but what does that look like day to day?
Day to day, and I'm really struggling to, like, this is my whole job and I never know how to explain it day to day. I think day to day, all I'm trying to do is to drive change. So the way that you do that is you kind of identify what needs to change. Then you go about building like potential solutions for that change. And then it's about getting the business on board. So all of this is kind of like research, then like idea creation, solution, brainstorming with like a wider team, working with tech teams, working with business intelligence engineers, with product managers, real like stakeholder engagement. And then you kind of bring all this wisdom together to create this business case to basically say, this is the problem we think we have. This is the solution we think we need. And this is what we need to be able to implement the solution. You get the business on board, and then the next step is just implementation of that solution. And I think I've been really lucky to have the experience of doing the end-to-end. So to be able to identify, build, get business support, implement, and then like literally roll it out across the rest of the business. So a lot of that, or in Amazon in particular, is writing a lot of docs. We write a lot of docs on Amazon. That is the only,
like report writing.
Reports, the only way we communicate, which I think is actually a really efficient way of working. But I've been there 6 years, so I'm very Amazon-ified.
Is inefficient or inefficient?
Very efficient.
Yeah, okay.
Very efficient.
Less emails.
You've drunk the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I have. And the reason being is that the purpose of the document is that you're meant to be able to write a 4-page document, and then everyone should be able to leave that meeting signing off multi-million, billion-pound investment just from that 4 pages.
It's like that kind of saying goes that if you are looking at like an investment, or if you've got an idea, if you explain it to a 5-year-old, and if they can't explain it back to you and it makes sense, then it's not a good idea or a good investment.
You've got some holes in your argument.
That's kind of the principle.
This forces you to fill every hole, because when you start writing, you're like, oh God, I actually wouldn't be able to answer that question. So then you have to go back, make sure you can answer that question. So it's hard to say what I do on a day-to-day. A lot of calls, work with the US quite a lot, lots of emails, lots of writing, but lots of brainstorming with the team. Like a lot of it is like real like innovation in a room. Guys, what should we do?
But by the sounds of it, writing skills are important.
Yeah.
People skills.
Hugely.
What other things? Organizational, by the sounds of it. But
persuasion, I would think.
Yeah, influence and persuade is absolutely massive. I think definitely. If you're trying to implement change, all you're really doing is influencing and persuading people to adopt new change, be it commercial or operational. So I was saying that I've always been in commercial roles. In the last 2 years, I've really moved into like operational design. But really, I don't know anything about operational excellence or design. I haven't really done it before. And this is about how do we implement processes and operations that allows the business to run more effectively, which basically reduces costs and reduces time for people who are like running the business. But really, it was a transferable skill, because all that is influence and persuasion. Like, this is implementing change. It's the same thing. What's not working? What should the solution be? Get the business on board, implement it, adopt it, report on it, and that's.
You've been on a few courses. I can see it. Love it.
And
no, it's brilliant.
Just while we're on skills and like the role, what do you think would be the differentiator to someone doing your job really well to someone doing it poorly? Like, what do you think makes a star employee?
I think any role that is trying to impact kind of the wider business, be it that whether your commercial strategy or something that you want to change in the business or launch, you need to. I think like energy really resonates with like the wider team. So if you come into a meeting with a level of energy, that energy people immediately feel, and that really gets them on your side. They get excited about what you're excited about. And that is like the start of I would start influencing people, getting people on the side, and listening to why someone would say no. Not just saying agree with you, we're doing what I do. It's actually like, okay, I totally understand what you're saying. How can we mitigate those complaints?
So it's a real collaborative effort.
Sure.
And just out of curiosity, when you come into these rooms, what's like the demographic of people? Because I think maybe this is just my like unconscious bias. You know, you think of like you walk in and there's like, you know, older men maybe, like,
Always.
do you know what I mean? But it's like, are we now in a time, particularly in a company like Amazon, where with like innovation and ideas, and it's a bit fresher and not quite so rigid in that type of culture?
They're surely trying to be.
Okay.
They are.
So still room for improvement.
But it does so happen that there are more male versions of the female doing that same role at a senior level.
Okay.
Because let's say they're like 40 or 50, and let's say they're in a job role that needs that level of experience. There are exceptions to that, which is tech and business intelligent engineers. They can be 21.
Yeah.
And they're as scary as the 50-year-old because I need them as much as I need the 50-year-old to be on board.
Yeah.
And they know I need them, so I have to really persuade those. So demographic can be really different. And you are often working with like absolute geniuses who really I don't understand their language and they don't care about what I'm trying to do, because they want to just implement their product, their new technology, or like their new automation. So working with them is a really interesting difference.
So you have to be a pretty good communicator. Have you had to develop that skill over time, or do you think it came quite naturally to you?
No, I've definitely had to develop that over time. I think I really benefited from really early on in like school, putting myself into positions and roles that put me outside my comfort zone to do that. So
Such as? If you don't mind me asking.
Well, such as like I ran for head girl and you had to do like a whole school election and a whole school speech, and like no one wants to do that at school. It's so cringy. And the speech was like really like kind of a Barack Obama type speech. Like everyone went for it. And your own peers were voting for you. So it was kind of like, oh God. So I did things like that. I was always kind of like trying to get involved in like charity organizations and would lead them or lead an event. Like it might seem really small now, but actually that all adds up to like getting really comfortable to just speaking to like different types of people of different ages, and like getting them on board with like your vision. So I think that really helped.
No, it's great. And I think it's commendable that even at a young age, you lent into like self-development, and maybe consciously or unconsciously, whatever the driver was at the time, but it's paid dividends because over time it's clearly held you in good stead.
Do you think, out of interest, if you take it back to head girl Beth and where you are today, do you think head girl Beth would have been surprised?
Oh, good question.
Good question. Do I think she would be surprised? No, I don't think she would. I think she'd be surprised that she's not in law, because that was definitely like a focus of mine, which definitely really pushed me to do all these extracurricular things, because you literally have to, otherwise you have no hope.
Yeah.
And I was dyslexic, so I was like really up against it. I should never have done law. Really, that was a stupid idea, but we are where we are. We persevered. We got a good grade. Fine. But I think she'd be proud that like I took risks. I've moved around a lot in my career. I've tried to stay authentic. Yeah. I'm happy.
But just adaptable as well. Exactly. Adaptable to change and resilient.
Which is just like so key, this adaptability to change. So many times in my career, things would have happened to like the whole organisation. And if I look back now, I so often was on the side of, I don't really know what's going to happen, but this could be a good change. And I'd always be around people who were like, oh no, I've lost my manager, this is going to be awful. And you just think, why is everyone so negative about that? But at the time I didn't realise that was actually just a really good attitude to have, because I basically made sure that even if the change did negatively impact me in the short term, because I jumped on it, I made it work for me. So I think it's like having that kind of like positive attitude and saying if you get knocked back, actually there could be a reason for that, and it could actually you could take 2 steps forward.
And where do you think that comes from then, that like positive outlook? And I think it's just a good thing to reflect on, because I know from knowing you personally, you always do seem to have a positive frame of mind and approach to things. And I think, like you said, that's fuel that other people don't necessarily have and can take you very far. Like, what do you think that stems from?
I think 2 places. There are 2 fathers. One, my worldly father, my dad. He is very much like me. He started his own business. Well, he actually got made redundant when my mum was pregnant with my sister, their first child. And he was like, that's fine. I'm going to start it on my own in the shed. And my mum was like, absolutely no, you're not. You're going to get a job. We're about to have a child. We have no money. And my dad was like, no, the shed's fine.
So it's like your own version of Bezos.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he didn't quite become Beths, but he maybe arguably
Still
happier.
Still time.
Yeah, still time.
Still time. But
And definitely seeing him, like he's always had so much passion for what he's done. And he's worked so hard at it. And I kind of think he definitely taught me that if you enjoy something, it won't feel like work. And therefore, you often can just like keep going. Like even if they get setbacks, you're like, do you know what? It's okay because I still enjoy it. So very much him, but also my spiritual father. I'm a Christian. And to me, that gives me such a big purpose outside of my career that if things go wrong in my career, I'm just like, okay, God's got a plan. Like we roll.
yeah.
There's got to be something good that's coming. Let me try and find it. This is what I'm here to do. So I think that really helps me not get bogged down in like day-to-day stress. I'm like, guys, it's just work. Like, why is everyone stressed?
Yeah. I often have to tell myself that, like work can get stressful and it can be difficult, and you be pulling your hair out, or you may have some conflict at work, like professional conflict. But then, there are difficult decisions to be made. But when you kind of sit back for a moment and you just think, do you know what? No one is going to die if I make a decision either way. So let's just like bring it back down to earth and be a bit more realistic about the situation. That tends to calm me down, actually. Just be like, okay, actually, it's not that deep.
It's not that deep, yeah. And then for me, I'm like, it's not that deep, and let's start praying, because I know who I can turn to solve that. And like me and my colleague at Amazon would always used to say, well, especially when we were launching our first store, it was like, don't get me wrong, I had sleepless nights. That is, please, I'm human. But would always just say, like, all we're doing is moving a can of baked beans around. Like, it's just a store. We're just selling baked beans. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, there's
don't
no
overcomplicate it almost.
No need to kill yourself if something goes wrong, because like it's life.
Yeah. And so what I'd like to do is, so we've kind of covered the first phase of a part of a phase of your career. But for our listeners who are listening to this and thinking, this sounds pretty sick, it sounds really cool. I'd quite like to, be in this kind of like, like change management or type of role. Where are they looking? Like, where are they starting? And how do they potentially get into it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've been trying to think about this myself. And I would actually say, just let go of a career path that you think is laid out for you. It doesn't exist. There is not like one size fits all to get into these types of roles. Which I think at first is not very helpful, because you're like, cool, so where do I start?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is you can almost start anywhere, but it's about being open to actually embracing change. And again, that is weird that you'd have to embrace change, become a change manager, but it helps. So for example, like I studied law, I took law, I didn't go and get a training contract. When I left uni, I didn't get one. Despite trying my utmost best, which was actually the biggest blessing for me, because I applied for one other grad scheme that was in Sainsbury's for supply chain, and I got it. So I literally applied for, I think, probably 65 training contracts, didn't get a single one. applied for one grad scheme, which is still so hard to get on, and got that one. And I was like, okay, God, let's go. And then I think it's...
By the sounds of it, surrendered yourself to the outcome.
For sure. Surrendered myself to it. But in my head, I was like, I'm still going to get a training contract. Like, I'm going to be even more employable now.
This was kind of like, this was the backup.
Sure.
I'm going to take this, get some commercial experience, some corporate experience.
Move to London with all my friends. That sounds fun. And in my head, I was like, that's all I'm doing. It's a stepping stone to a training contract. And then I joined and I was like, okay, this is actually really fun. This is quite cool. I'm actually quite good at this. And I was in kind of a few different roles. And then I still applied for a training contract. And at the same time, Amazon headhunting me. And I'd got to the final round of this shipping law firm for this training contract. And for anyone who hasn't been through the law journey, getting to the final round of training contract is very hard in itself. And I had Amazon on the table as well, who had just gone through those interviews. And I went into this final interview like, oh, I'm finally going to do my dream. And the guy who interviewed me was the biggest beep I had ever met. And he just treated me like
Really?
I've never felt so belittled and patronised in my life.
Mad.
And I think if I had come straight out of uni, I would have been like, yes, sir, no, sir, whatever you want, sir. But because I'd had a couple of years at working with like some real leaders in their own industry who would treat me with respect and as a peer. And I'm not saying this is the same for all law firms. But to me, that was like, okay, this is not a culture that I can work in.
Yeah.
And not all law firms are the same, but this one in particular, I think it was a sign
It can leave a bad taste in your mouth, can't it? That first experience, after you've had like, this is your sort of like your passion, you've been looking forward to this.
Yeah.
And then your experience is, this donkey, which is a real shame. But as my mum says, everything happens for a reason.
Correct.
And, if you have a disappointment, just see what's around the corner. And then
Amazon.
Presumably you took the Amazon job, yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell I've never applied for a training contract again.
I think one other important aspect of all of that is knowledge of your own worth at that point in time.
Yeah.
Like if you'd come out of university, you probably would have like been in a very different position and may have thought, I deserve that. But like, quite frankly, no one does. And I'm really sorry that you had to experience that. Like and I'm sure Nikki, I've come across in my career. It's not pleasant. And it's a shame that they do seem to creep in, especially in the legal sector at points. But yeah, it's not ideal. And I would say Amazon's gain is the law or legal industry's loss. And yeah, by the sounds of it, you've made great strides in your own career. And I'm sure you're the one instructing lawyers now, as opposed to taking the instructions.
I work with them all the time. Honestly, they're actually a pain in my ass.
Nice.
So just before we go into your background a bit, I think it'd be helpful just to understand a bit more about your upcoming role and how that came about, and what you think the future is going to look like.
Sure. Yeah. So I think if anyone who's been in a company outside of a profession, I think obviously when I say professions, I mean like the legal profession, the financial industry. They're kind of a bit more of a career path, but when you're outside of those kind of like traditional professions, really you can almost go in any direction. And often, actually, there's too much choice that you don't make any choice. I see this time and time again in Amazon for sure. So I was really conscious that I've been there 6 years. So from my 4-year mark, I was like, no, I need to find my exit. But just to make sure that I'm really pushing myself and I'm getting as much experience as I can while I can. So I've been looking for the right thing for a while, because when you jump from Amazon, you've got to make the right jump. Any company you leave, you don't take the first thing that comes to your door. You jump and you want to make sure that jump is something that's really going to push you, but also in like an exciting way. So something that you actually want to do. Don't just follow the money. Very, very tempting. I mean, get the money, but don't just
get the bag, sis.
Get the bag. There are priorities.
Yeah, but that comes, right?
It comes.
We all have to start somewhere, and it's a journey. It takes time, and then with that compounding effect, what you'll find is you'll go. The leaps will be greater the further down the line you are. So just be patient; it will come.
Sure, exactly. So this opportunity came up where I'm about to go now, which is called Heroes. It's a Series 8 startup. My manager who managed me in Amazon, I've worked with him for about 3.5 years. He's an incredible leader, really inspirational, incredibly talented. And we've really just had a really good working relationship. So he was leaving to be the CCO of this company. Chief
Information?
No.
CCO. It's not
CCO,
compliance.
Chief Commercial Officer.
Okay, commercial.
Chief Commercial Officer.
Okay.
So there's 3 co-founders, which are 3 brothers. And he is the first exec, basically. So they're at a stage, they're about 12 months. They've been open now. And they're at a stage they need to start bringing in like an executive board and some senior talent to kind of lead them into kind of like a real high growth stage. They're about to go from probably about 50 employees to like maybe 1,000 in the next 2-3 years. So they're in this big leap.
So while we're on that, can you explain what a Series A startup is?
So a Series A startup basically means they've had their first round of funding from like an external investor. So a lot of startups at the very beginning is kind of family and friend money. So your own personal money or family and friends. Series A is when you've actually engaged with like
like institutional
be it angel
type
investors and you actually have now a commitment to an investor who, depending on the agreement, owns a percentage share of your business now. And they inject, let's say, 20 million with the idea that you've got a business case that says in 3 years it will be 300 million. These are just fictitious numbers, but that's kind of what a Series A startup means, which it basically means it has good backing.
Okay.
And the idea clearly has legs.
Yeah.
However, it's still a startup and it contains all the risk of a startup, but less risk than a startup that's like an app.
Yeah.
And 2 people work on it and they've got no funding. So yeah, I'm going in there to be the director of brand management, which I basically be responsible for driving the performance of the business. So what the business does is we buy Amazon sellers, successful Amazon sellers, and we aggregate them together. So we buy them across the globe, and we are all about kind of building the synergies between the brands, synergies in the supply chain, the marketing, global expansion, and getting them into different channels. So there might just be an Amazon right now. We might move them onto Walmart, Target, all these other kind of channel expansion. So I'll be responsible for driving that performance.
Is it in mainly the mainland US or across the UK, Europe as well?
We're kind of country agnostic, but we are a UK-based country. But we have 2 offices in Europe as well and 1 in China for our imports.
Right, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so if the investment side of our business, which is not me, deemed the company to be worth buying, we buy it wherever it is.
Yeah, fair.
So I'm responsible for driving that performance, but also setting us up to scale. So at the moment, we're obviously doing quite a lot of day-to-day, let's just keep the lights on because we've grown so quickly. Yeah. Now we need to think, okay, actually, in 3 to 4 years' time, how do we want to operate this business? Like, what processes do we need? What offshore teams do we need? And when I say offshore, I mean utilizing kind of teams in like faraway countries, so be it in Asia or Eastern Europe, to operate some of our like day-to-day tasks for us. So these are all the kind of things that I haven't started yet, but that I need to start thinking about. So, which is quite overwhelming, but I'm super excited.
Sounds great.
And I think that's all super interesting, and we might have to get you back on once you're a bit deeper into the role to hear more about what that actually looks like day to day. But outside of work, do you do anything to kind of like hedge, for instance, a circumstance where you might not be working for a period of time, like, or are all your eggs in the kind of career basket?
World?
Really good question. No, they're not. I would ideally want to build more and more eggs outside of my career. I actually love my career, so I'm really lucky that I enjoy it, and it doesn't feel like a chore to me. However, my real life goal is to make more money, invest less time if I had to build a graph. And the only way to do that is to basically remove myself from the equation and to make money that doesn't require my hours to go in. So my husband's been pretty influential in this, if not pushy, in the last 3 years. And COVID was actually, a hard time, but really that gave us some space to really think, what do we want out of our life? Like, do we want to be on this rat race where we're just working like 9 to 5/9 to 8 every single day? Or do we want to be able to work when we choose to work? So we've started a few different kind of avenues of revenue. I mean, we've got into crypto, who hasn't? We actually decided to not buy our own house, and we bought 2 houses as a buy-to-let, which is going well. We also invested in a children's nursery. And I personally sell some products on Amazon as well.
Sick.
So use some of
Is there a conflict of interest there?
No, they encourage
Are you going to try buy yourself?
I mean, I might try and sell.
No, that's wicked. There's a lot going on there, and I think people will be thinking, oh my God, like, where do you find the time for all of this? So where do you find the time for all this, Beth?
How
does someone with your career aspirations and the stuff you're doing in the corporate world balance that with your endeavors outside of work, which sound fantastic and I think would be very inspirational for people to hear about?
So it is really hard, and I think I was whining to my husband the other day, like, I just have too many things I'm thinking about. I'm either thinking about this, and then I have to think about this, and obviously we have like a very busy social life, which I love as well, which you guys partake in. So I think, how do I do it? So my first kind of realization, probably about 3 years ago, is that I was applying way more of my talents to Jeff Bezos than I was to my own life, which did not feel right. Jeff Bezos does not know me, and I know my own life. So I probably should be applying some of that talents to my own life. And I say this a lot to like friends and family. In your job, you might make a decision that we need to do X, and then you'd have like a whole plan of how you were going to get to X, and you're building all these risk mitigations, and you'll do that for somebody else. You do that for your own life. So we kind of, the first thing we did was to kind of take a lot of time to work out, what do we want to do, and then how are we going to do it. And I think that was an important time for us to take, because then we said, okay, but we also still both work full time, so how are we going to do all these other things? And a lot of that is really, really looking at like, where do you add value and where don't you? So like, where can you outsource things? Where can you stop doing things? And when I mean stop doing things you don't enjoy, but carry on doing. That doesn't mean like stop seeing your friends. That's not the kind of sacrifice that I would be personally willing to make. I think that's super, super important. I think how I try and do it, we've definitely invested in like help. So we kind of got a financial advisor, and these are, and other services. These are all things that I initially was like, I can do it myself. And then you realize, no, Beth, you cannot do it as efficiently yourself as somebody else. Spend the money. Yes, it might affect your profit margin, but actually at the end of the day...
In the short term.
But
long term,
Long term, you're trying to build this portfolio of streams, and that's the important part today.
I think, so Naval Ravikant talks about in the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, amazing book, and he's at some point has said that you should set an aspirational hourly target rate. So even if you're not, you should say, how much is my time worth every hour? And if it's £2,000 an hour, and that's what you think it's going to be when you get to where you want to get to, then certain things won't make sense for you to do, and you've almost got to back yourself that you're going to get there, and you spend the money, say if it's, I don't know, on an activity that might take an hour, in the knowledge that actually that thing might cost you £20, but it's saving you £1,980. But yeah, I think that's it requires a mature outlook. It requires you to be quite disciplined with yourself by the sounds of things, and by the sounds of it, though, it's paid dividends and will continue to do so.
Literally.
That's right, literally.
It's hard work, but you learn so much from it. So even if all of them failed, again, like, it's this fear of failure thing. So when I was doing this Amazon selling thing, even if that fails, what I've learned about launching a business on Amazon, I can now apply to this new role that I'm about to go into. That's literally the businesses we buy.
Yeah.
So even if that wasn't working, it's paid itself back just from what I've learned. And that's kind of a bit different outlook of, oh, but what if it doesn't work? What if I lose all my money? Okay, well, what if you just do it?
Yeah,
and you lose all your money anyway? And obviously, only invest what you can. Don't be stupid.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much information out there now, right? Like, you watch these reels and it's on Instagram or whatever, TikTok, and it's just like, how to become a millionaire selling Amazon products. And it's like, okay, look, I'm sure some people have been hugely successful doing it. So it's not impossible, but you've got to take the time to learn. And when you actually start doing it, as I'm sure you've discovered, and I haven't done it myself, I'm just speculating, but it's you have to understand the supply chain, marketing, how to even get your products on Amazon, in their warehouse, delivered, find the right product, price it correctly. There's so many aspects to this whole journey that it's not just like, oh yeah, I got Alibaba and I'll just buy a product and sell it. It's a process, but you learn so much. So even if you just go, right, I'm going to buy one product, 100 quid, and just learn the process.
And that's as much as it will cost you just to learn it.
Yeah.
And you could literally buy one product from Alibaba. It will cost you £100 because shipping is at least £100. You could sell 2 items on Amazon and you'd learn enough doing that, selling 2 million.
And it's invaluable, I guess, in your new role that you're going into, because no one can really say, oh, what do you know about selling products on Amazon?
True, very true. Yeah, God definitely had a plan there. I started this 6 months before I got offered the job, so...
I think you summed it up really well there, Nikki, and thanks for sharing it with us, Beth. I think this is probably one for some of our older listeners maybe who have their own income, but what stands out to me is the question of, if you do quote unquote fail in terms of losing money, where does it actually leave you? If you're not losing your home, if you're still in employed work, if you don't have any dependents and you're not taking those sorts of risks, I'm not saying you should always take risks, you should obviously do what you're comfortable with, but it's I've certainly gone through my own journey on it, getting to that point where you realise the worst thing that can happen is I get up and go to work the next day and collect my salary at the end of the month, and life
which again continues. There's nothing wrong with,
no.
Right? It just depends on what outcomes you want and what you're looking for out of life. You've mentioned that you've sat down with your husband and you've assessed your lives and your future, and you've decided what you want to do and then how you're going to get there, and this is just a part of that cog.
And it doesn't mean I actually want to run my own business, and this is kind of a transition that I'm going through, because I feel like we're definitely in this era where if you're not an entrepreneur and you don't own your own business, why are you even living? I actually, what you're doing. And I do not agree with that line that is being pushed right now.
Be your own boss.
Yeah, exactly. I am my own boss. Yes, I work for somebody else for sure, but they cannot tell me to do something I'm not happy about doing because I'm off.
And you've got equity in the business and you kind of work for yourself.
So you're So I think it's one of those things, these revenue streams are more for me to kind of have this disposable income to make the choice. I might choose to work for someone for the rest of my life. And if I'm enjoying that and I'm getting fulfillment from that, and I can sleep at night, and that is underrated. Hugely underrated.
Hugely underrated.
That I haven't taken so much risk that I can actually sleep like a baby.
Yeah.
Then I'll stay in the career. If my Amazon selling takes off and I need to make a decision, then we'll make a decision. But it's, I'm definitely not sitting here just saying, create these revenue streams, then leave your job.
And just to stress as well that in order to do that, to create those streams, it takes knowledge and time, a lot of time actually, because not just to learn, but you need capital as well. It depends on where you're starting and what your goals and desired outcomes are, but it takes time. If you're looking to invest in, let's say, even like a buy-to-let property, you need to do your research on areas, the fundamentals of those areas, what it actually takes to manage a buy-to-let, because it's not all hands-off in all cases or many cases. And you actually have to have a pot of money to be able to go out and buy it. So it takes time, patience, saving, discipline. But it is possible.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And just on your kind of role, I think the only other thing I'd like to like just delve into a little bit before we go into your background is any positions of responsibility that are non-paying that you also manage to fit into what seems like a ridiculous schedule.
Yes, I'm actually my own worst enemy when it comes to filling my time. I'm also on the board of a school. I'm a school governor.
The one that you were head girl at?
The one that I was head girl at.
Love that.
Yeah. So I've been on this board for about 2 years now. So it's a complete voluntary role, non-paid. My role there is to basically advise on the entire school strategy, where they spend their money, challenge them on kind of policy and the health performance and Ofsted. So I kind of got into this out of a program which is called Diversity on the Board. Mm-hmm. Which I can massively see the need in, having joined. So I joined, and I am one of 6 governors, all of which are retired white men, and then there's me, and then a female clerk who takes notes. So
How traditional.
And this is a really big 2,000 pupil state school with an international boarding house. So it's incredibly diverse. We have all sorts of different backgrounds that are attending the school. So for me, I was super passionate, one, about giving back to a school that was just like so fantastic for me. I met my husband there. I learned so many life lessons. I was really fortunate to go to such a good state school. So I wanted to give back, but also there's loads of different things that I've actually got from being on this board that I didn't initially intend on the benefits, but for me, like selfishly, it's actually been great. So for example, I actually now know roughly how to be sitting on a board, which I would love to do for maybe some big businesses in the future. Maybe. So it's a skill in itself. And I've met some really amazing people who also sit on the board who, you know, are much older than me. They've like bought and sold businesses. They've all worked in different fields. So it's really broadened my network. And I've been able to kind of give back, and which has been, you know, invaluable. So it's been a great position, but it's a lot to do on top of it.
No, it sounds fantastic. And I think for any, you know, women listening, I think it's an inspiration myself. It's inspirational to me.
And men.
And men. I just want to emphasize that, you know, that there is still that like stereotype and culture that it's, you know, it is really difficult for women, but I think you're a great example of what can be achieved, you know.
You should write a book on how to take a sledgehammer to the glass.
Yeah, exactly. And just on the theme of the school that you are governor at and went to, we like to give our listeners a bit of the benefit of your personal life and journey, you know, coming through and what you've learned, some of your key influences. So can you give us a bit of a overview of your upbringing, your parents' backgrounds, sort of the socioeconomic, you know, situation you grew up in, things like that? Sure.
I mean, I might have put a sledgehammer to the glass ceiling, but not so much, that I had an amazing upbringing. So I had a very good start to life. So I will not take any credit for that. I was super privileged to be in the kind of family household that I was in. So weren't like super wealthy, nothing like that, but was very much brought up in a really loving nuclear home in a really small village in West Sussex. So I didn't have much exposure to kind of like big business and things like that. So I don't think that was really what I was surrounded by. But as I mentioned earlier, my dad is like a really good human, is how I would say. And I've seen how much his goodness has rewarded him in his business, just like continuing to be like a good guy. Often they say like everyone steps on the good guy, and I'm sure that is true if you want to be a billionaire. But if you don't want to be a billionaire, you just want to be a good guy and be successful, people like working with good people.
Yeah.
And he works so hard. And my mum worked for him as well. So I was brought up with my mum and my dad. My mum, obviously, behind every great man is a great woman, and honestly, you cannot even say that is my mum by definition. She kept us all alive and worked full time with my dad as well, supporting all of the office bits. My dad can't even write an email, so like, it just gives you a perspective of what my mum was doing for my dad. So he's an engineer. And like between them, you know, they've been amazing role models of being able to be kind of like great parents to me and my sister, and really good people to like our whole village. Like I always see when you're around the village, like everyone is just always coming around my mum and dad's house for like any support or anything, and like they have time for everybody.
The heart and soul of the village.
Yeah, well, kind of. It's a bit sad, but both my grandparents are also born in that village, so and they were both married there. And my mum and dad met.
Where did they meet,
Beth?
Beth?
Primary school.
Primary school, and your parents?
Primary school. Same primary school.
And where did you meet your husband?
Not primary school.
Not primary school. Secondary school.
Secondary school when I was 15.
Yeah. The graduation.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
So yeah, it was a fast-paced household, but nothing more full of love and like good lessons of, you know, be good to other people, work hard. It's very much what they were modelled, and they worked collaboratively as a team. So I think for me that was like was an amazing start to life, and that I feel like that security enabled me it gave me a foundation to take risks off, because you know, really, how far could I fall?
Yeah.
You know, if that's your base, which is like two parents who like love and support you and would welcome you back with open arms, I mean, how fortunate can you be? Is start to life, and I'm grateful for that every day. So really, it was for me to jump and take risks because they'd given me that platform to be able to do that.
I think you mentioned it, Alex, one time. You mentioned this concept of everyone having a different floor.
Ground zero.
Different ground zero, yeah. Do you want to maybe just touch on that a little bit?
No, I think Beth summed it up really well there, and I think it's important to acknowledge that I know very similarly, like absolute worst case scenario, I lose my license, I lose my job. There's a room that my parents will find a room in their house for me, and like that's worth more than any money I could ever be given.
So encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah.
And on top of that, and what I'm getting from you, and I'm sure you get, which is I think real body armor as adults, is no doubt your parents are proud of you. So it's like whatever you do now or choose to do, like it made my career change all the easier, because my dad says it, he's like, I'm proud of you, son, every time I speak to him, and I know that is worth so much, and I don't take it for granted at all. And undoubtedly having that like really solid relationship with your parents, if anything, it's a springboard to pushing on in life and trying things. Yeah,
and I think just to briefly touch on that, not everyone is as fortunate as we are, and their ground zero is, you know, lower than ours. But we know where our parents started, right? And me personally, you know, we came to this country, my parents brought us with them with nothing, like borrowed money. Like they had no ground, like they were the ground zero. Do you know what I mean? Like they had nothing to fall back on and no one. So, but they what they did was allowed us to
you.
Exactly, like they raised that floor, you know, to levels that it's like insane. And so like they were able to do it with nothing. So I want that to be encouragement for people, that you can still have that low floor, as we're referring to it, but you can make it. And, you know, you just like listen to the things that we're talking about and just take away something, you know, and listen to the people that we're speaking to as well, and where they came from, what they've achieved through hard work and persistence. So I just think that's important to mention. So I think we're coming towards the end time-wise, but
we like to ask a few just like final questions, and I'll start and kick it off with, are there any particular books that have been influential to you in terms of your journey to date that you would recommend to listeners, maybe our age and younger?
I think anyone's going to be surprised if I say the Bible. I mean, to me, there is nothing that I can't learn from the Bible. And like I said before, I know our subject is your career, but in life, I feel like as humans, we're here to find purpose and we're here to have perspective. And if you have those kind of 2 Ps, everything else is a lot easier to deal with, because you understand what you're here to do and you have perspective on things, and you don't and you know, if something bad happens, you don't crumble down to zero because you have this big foundation behind you. And for me, it's absolutely what like my faith and the Bible has given to me. And you know, I would make a claim that you cannot get those 2 Ps from your career, but those 2 Ps can absolutely make you successful in your career. So I think definitely it might not be the Bible for you, but definitely look for some outside purpose or perspective that is important to you. And I wouldn't tie that all into your career, because your career can go wrong. So you're putting too much
or the economy
pressure,
can.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's completely outside your control. And putting all of your like reliance on something that's outside your control is not a good idea, because you know, it could just happen and you're just going to be crushed. So the Bible for me, the second one I would say then was probably the 4-hour working week.
Tim Ferriss.
Yes.
That you mentioned before.
It has been,
Yeah, I'm sure. It's one of those really... I mean, I don't do it. I don't work 4 hours a week, just to give everyone a think
400-hour work.
I'm here cruising. It's also count Amazon. I definitely work more than 4 hours a week. you got what you paid for. Don't worry. But what it did to me, I think I read it really early on, and it's not too boring, because I'm not actually a huge non-fiction reader. I know everyone you're meant to be. I try my best. I read 5 a year.
There's nothing you're meant to be, you know?
Sounds like you're doing fine.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'm learning through life as a book. But I think all it does, it just shows you a different way of living. And that's kind of where I had my graph earlier, like make more money that does not have reliance on my time. And that actually might mean making less money. But if I make less money, but I have no time input, I've made money. Because the value you're building in your own life to have that freedom of choice is kind of invaluable. So
time is our most precious asset.
Sure.
It is.
The one thing you can spend and then not get any back of.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right, book, guys.
Well, I think Alex is in the process of doing that, so we'll share some news with you at some point, I'm sure. And just another question, what would be the best piece of advice that you've learnt to date that you would give your 18-year-old version self? The 18-year-old version of yourself.
Good question. I think I personally would tell my 18-year-old self to just drop the life plan. I think there's a real tendency, especially at a young age, to set yourself this life plan ahead of you that says, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to get married at this point, then I'm going to have children, and then you're not old enough or wise enough to make that decision. I'm not old enough and wise enough now to have a life plan. And, you know, I'm going on 30 and I've been married for 4 years and I've had 3 careers. I still cannot sit here and make a life plan because you don't have control over that plan. I think sometimes when you make something so detailed and it doesn't go exactly as in each step, you think you're failing. And what you can really blind yourself to the opportunities that you're actually are in front of you because you're just so fixated on this one plan that you created. And I think that for me was with this whole law, training, contact piece, I was really blinded by this life plan. And I think instead, obviously have a plan, but the plan should more be
guide.
A guide, which is like in 10 years' time, what do I want my life to be like?
To look like.
Not even look like.
Yeah.
Be like.
Okay.
Because look is still visual.
Okay.
Feeling.
A
I like
feeling.
that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
how do I want it to be like? I want to be happy, fulfilled. I want to have built a life with someone. I want to have a group of good friends. I want to be financially secure. And these kind of things can be actually the aspiration. And you just work back. There's so many ways you can get all of those things.
Yeah. Working back is so important, I think, as well. Once you get some semblance of idea of what it is that you would like, work backwards, because then you can actually maybe start to discover what it is you need to do to, begin that journey.
Yeah.
But as Beth said, with not too much rigidity, but a bit more fluidity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why it's good to have a monthly plan and a yearly plan, and then look further into the future, but don't be so rigid and sort of tough on yourself as well, but achieving that, or if your plan changes, that's why you have shorter term goals as well.
And
so.
On that, I think it's important to be open, and I'll share that I've definitely fallen victim to being super rigid with a plan, even this year, to be honest. It's something I've had to kind of check myself on, because you can achieve a lot and feel like you're not achieving anything because you set ridiculous goals. And I think, it's something I'm learning. I don't think anyone's got the secret sauce necessarily, but yeah, I think that's a really wise point, which I'm really pleased you brought up, because I know I've not always got that right, and it's something that can really crush you in life when there's no need for it to.
Yeah, and I think it can blind you from everything that's amazing in your life, because you just fixate on this one part of your plan that didn't work. But actually, if you just take a step to be like, actually, okay, this didn't work in this year's plan, but what did I achieve this year? And you're like, God, I've had an amazing year. I have had some amazing memories and experiences and I've learned loads about myself and other people.
Sometimes you have to look back to look forward as well.
For sure. And I think sometimes these rigid plans, and don't get me wrong, have a vision, definitely have a vision, but also be super okay if that vision changes on a weekly basis. Because I know I'm in the world of change, but the more you're cool, that's changed, let's be resilient, let's move with it, let's be adaptable, you can kind of make it work for you.
Amazing.
All I can say on final comments is wow.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Shout out.
That was amazing. And
amazing.
I'm really, really thankful for you coming on today, Beth. It's been really illuminating, super insightful, and I think there'll be a lot for a lot of our listeners to take away. And even just us.
Even just us.
Yeah,
we're learning how to lay eggs and put them in different baskets.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? Yes, thank you so much, Beth, for coming on. I think you're an inspirational woman, and so much to take away for our listeners. So, can't wait to get this one out.
Great. It's been amazing speaking to you both.
Thanks, Beth. Guys, thank you so much for listening or watching, however you're viewing or listening to this. We had a really great conversation, and look forward to getting our next guest on. Please give us a like, share, comment, subscribe. We're on all the platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. The handle is at Hard Work Beats Talent Podcast. And if you've got any questions or have any stories to share, drop us a DM and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Beth.